create a quilt pattern using graph paper. Yes, my friends, you can do this. Measurements. An average fat quarter is 21 inches by 18 inches. Your graph paper, you can easily put a 28-inch by 36-inch on each sheet of graph paper, and then block out your blocks to create your pattern. Twin size quilt is approximately 72 inches by 90 inches. And our borders do not have to be straight. They can be block patterns, piano keys, straight. Maybe one is 10 inches, one is 2 inches. All kind of ideas for creativity there. Grab your graph paper, my friends, open it up to a nice page, a blank page, draw out your 27 or 28-inch pattern by 36 inches, and then we're going to multiply that by 4 and add some borders to it.
Here is the layout Sylvia helped me create for today's video tutorial.
All right, now take your 27 by 36 and just start sketching out some blocks, some patterns that you think might work, and then we can go ahead and
write the color of the fabric blocks that you've selected directly on the pattern.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are working on a pattern that Sylvia sat down and drew out real quick for me. And then I went ahead and selected the different colors of fabrics, cut them all out to the measurements here, and you can use a little sticky note or a pen to pin them to it so you know what you're doing. And we're going to make 4 times this count to make a full twin size quilt. So we've got all these pieces. We've multiplied 2 times 4, 1 times 4, and cut out all of the pieces. And now we're sewing them together. So we've created our own quilting pattern. And now we're taking the right sides of my bicycle and my blue, and we're sewing them together. And I'm going to go ahead and do a stack of 4 at a time. And I am once again on a card table. I have received a brand new metal table. It will be put up hopefully tomorrow, but most likely on Monday, and then you won't see me bounce anymore. So I do apologize about the bouncy. We're going to try and push the table over to side. And also, you know that I've been quilting a lot of quilts on the long arm lately, learning how to do that. So I have a lot of bobbins that are the metal bobbins for the long arm, and I am using them in the sewing machine instead of the spool of thread at the very top of the machine. So we're using up these bobbins so we can refresh them and use them on the long arm. But we're taking advantage of all of the thread, not letting anything go to waste. So we're going to go through all of our bicycles and our blues together, right sides together. And on the pattern, the bicycle goes on top, the blue goes on the bottom, because we're doing this right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew up these 4. And then we will match up the next 4. We'll bring them over to the iron, press them, and then combine them. And again, I am on a card table, so it is shaky. I'm not happy with that. But I do have a brand new metal table that is going to be set up and that I will be using in just a couple of days. So watch the tutorials. I'm so excited about this new table. I have not seen it out of the box yet. It is one we have to put together. But that box is huge and very heavy. When I say huge, I think the table is going to be about the size of this 4-foot card table. But again, it's going to be sturdy. It's not going to bounce anymore. I'm going to be so excited to have that put together. All right, so the last blue one going at the bottom of our bicycles, and then we're going to pull these out. We're going to press them, and we can go ahead and put the next fabric that we've selected for the 6" by 10" onto the side of them. And this is almost too wobbly to handle, so I do apologize about that ahead of time. But we are putting these together, and they're going to go upright like so. Okay, and the next piece I think we'll do is the orange with the blue house fabric, a 4 by 6, meaning 4 across, 6 high, and this is 6 high by 8 across. So we have our two pieces that we're going to attach like so. We got to make sure all of our houses go upright, and then this connects on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and put all of our houses face up, make sure I've cut them properly, and that I won't have any houses upside down to be a big surprise. And then we're going to take this, we're going to put one of our what I'm calling orange slices, the pinks, the yellows, the orange, and we're going to put it right on there, and we're going to sew all 4 of these. And I'm holding the threads at the beginning, and that way it won't knot up or a bird's nest on the back. And we're taking our second piece, we're putting them right sides together. And we're going to put these two, make sure we only have one piece of the blue, one piece of the orange, and we're putting them right on top of each other. We could pin the whole stack and then zip them out real quick, or do them like I am, since they are short in length, length. I don't have to worry about this getting out of control and not being completely even. And again, I do not recommend working on a wobbly table like you see me currently doing, but I am so excited about this quilt that I did not want to wait the 2 days until I get my table set up. So we're making do with the card table at the moment. Oh, and I got a little off on the end. We're going to have to go back and double check on that. And that's what happens when you have a camera in between you and the sewing machine. Ha ha ha. All right, and here we go again. And again, pinning would keep that from pulling it. Or maybe just not having an obstacle in between you and the sewing machine. Okay, and needle up, pull that away, leave a long enough on there, and then we have this stack ready for the iron to be pressed, and then once we press them open we can connect them to the next piece. Okay, and the next one we're doing is a 7 by 7 purple house piece, and then a 5 by 7 yellow piece, so it's 5 across, 7 down for these, purple house and yellow. So we are going to go ahead and grab our purple houses, make sure they're all setting upright, and then we're going to grab the yellow that we selected, and the yellow that we're going to use on this is a 7" by 7", and I'm looking to see where that is in my stack. Well, let me run to the ironing board, so I have probably left those on the ironing board. Okay, so now I have my yellow and my purple, and we're going to go ahead and put them together, and it's going to be right sides together, the yellow on the right side of the purple, according to our pattern that we are closely following. Oopsie, right here, that we are closely following. And we're going to lay right sides together and sew them up real quick, making sure all of our houses are upright. Just make sure they're perfectly aligned up together. And our next two pieces are the yellow 5" by 3" on top of our multicolor 5" by 13". And we're just making sure we are putting each piece face to face, and we're running them through and sewing all 4 of these, and then we'll run to the ironing board. And these tend to want to stick together. Interesting. And last one. Almost hard to tell the right side from the wrong side. All right, and we are over to the ironing board. We're heating up our iron to the cotton setting because we are working with quilter's cotton, and we're going to go ahead and open up all of our pieces and go ahead and press them . So we're going to run through our stacks, setting them to the side when we are done. And it sounds like I need a little water in here for my steam. But on these pieces, we're just doing 2 layers, so I think we're fine. I've got 2 pieces there. And hitting them with the iron in between sewing on the next block, make sure that our seam is laid flat. We trim our threads, and that way when we put the next piece on, our seams are always going in the correct direction, so we don't have to worry about excess bulk. And we're just stacking them up to the side, and then we will refer back to our pattern for our next piece that we'll add on to the quilt block. And again, it's just a quick press, but it is a very important step to go through each of these pieces, making sure that they are pressed. And that way you're going to be much happier with your quilt. Your long armor will be much happier with your quilt, and you'll have a much more professional, secured seams, straight project when you are done. It just works out better. All right. And I'm just going to keep on ironing all of the blocks that I have just sewn together. And then we'll go back and hook on the next pieces. All right, so just as it says, the bicycle piece and the blue that I have right here is going to be connected to the motorhome piece that I have right here. So let's go ahead and sew those 4 blocks together, because remember, we're doing 4 times what my pattern shows us to do. Okay, and my next patch here is my orange and my blue house, and my purple house and my yellow. So I have my orange and my blue, my purple and my yellow, and now let's go ahead and sew those together. And we've lined up our houses, our colors, and right here in the seam is where you'd want to stick a pin to make sure that you're holding in probably 2 places. Then I'll hold at the bottom and I'll watch it at the top. So if you have pins handy, I recommend sticking a couple of pins in these pieces, because we're now working on putting something that is, what do we have? 7 by 5, so we're looking at a 12-inch across piece. So go real slow and make sure that you hold it or that you're pinning it. And when I lay out these blocks, I have them side by side so that when I put them up to the sewing machine to sew, I can line them up perfectly, corner to corner, when I go to put them in the sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to lock that piece down. I'm going to make sure my sides are great. I put my needle here and I put my needle here with the other seam. If I'm using needles or easily distracted, not watching that, make sure those tops of the fabric is perfectly aligned. Realign it at the end to where we're holding it perfect there. And I go ahead and I'm watching that line right on the inside of my foot as I sew it through. And we've got 2 more of these to sew together, and we'll jump on to the next block. And again, holding them perfectly together to where the seams and the sides, I should say the sides of the fabric, are perfectly aligned, making sure I'm perfect as I go. If I have my pins or I'm a new sewer, I put my pen right in there and I pull it out right before I get to it. Realign at the end before you get there. Make sure you're perfectly lined up. You're not sewing over your finger. You just bring it right up to, then you remove it. You have this finger right next to it, and you can finish it off. And if you're going to stop for a while, you can back stitch to lock that stitch in. And we're doing our last of this color block, and then we move on to the next. And my friends, keep working through your pattern that you've created. Easy graph paper is fun to do with that. And then keep laying your pieces side by side and going through them, matching them right sides together, making sure that you only have 1 piece of fabric, not 2, as when you cut them in different stacks, sometimes they do like to stick together. And then we're going to piece them together and just keep on going through the whole stack. And your pieces, right side up, same sides together. Making sure you're putting this on the correct side each time. And we're lining it up perfectly with the fabric, putting that through. And we can backstitch at the end. All right, 2 more of these same pieces. Again, always make sure you are right sides together and that you're putting the fabrics on the correct side with the houses upright. I know this piece is on this side, so I want to make sure I connect it on that side. And when you do one at a time, you've got your pattern right next to you. If you're not using pens with instructions on little sticky notes, it's good to have that pattern right next to you. And I like to go ahead and chain stitch a lot of blocks and then bring a lot of blocks at the same time to the ironing machine. Again, right sides together. Make sure you have it on the correct side of the pattern of the fabric to match the pattern that you have written out. And just remember, when you write out your patterns, you've got to deduct a 1/4 inch on each piece. So even though I have given you the instructions, you will notice that what I've actually cut out is a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch difference on some of the pieces, a 1/2 inch on some of the pieces where multi-layers connect together. And I'm going to go over that for you so you understand that part. But right now, let's go ahead and trim all these fabric, bring them over to the ironing board, and get them all pressed out. And we are back at the ironing board. What I like to do first is go ahead and plug in my iron. I like to then go ahead and turn it on. If I needed steam, I'd add the water before I plugged it in and turned it on, obviously. But then I take my pieces and I'm going to cut them apart and stack them while I'm waiting for the iron to heat up. So we're just going to go ahead and trim these up, stack them in their same kind stacks, and then we press. Okay, so we have that round of stacks of pieces of our blocks laid out. So now we're going to go ahead and grab one stack at a time and start pressing. And how nicely those blocks are turning out so far. Throw that over to a stack. And what I'm doing is placing it down, picking up a corner, going ahead and repressing what I've already done, pulling that iron slightly over it so it's keeping that seam down in the same direction, and pressing that out. Then we're grabbing that finished block, throwing it over to our stack and going on to the next. Same thing, pull it off of the stack, open the first piece, repress what we've already done, bring that iron out so it's pressing that block straight down. And then we throw that on the stack. And we're just going to keep on doing this, pile after pile, until we're ready to go back to the sewing machine and start our next pieces that connect to these pieces. And these we haven't sewn anything on, so we're just opening the top piece, bringing that iron up so that seam is pressed down, starting a new stack with these two. And continuing until we're through with this stack and grab the next. Ooh, and I'm so excited. Look at this block. This one, I really love how those colors blend. Okay, and now on our next piece, we're going to look for the one that we did was the bicycle, the blue, and the motorhome. Bicycle, blue, and the motorhome. And we're going to match it together with the orange, blue house, purple house, and yellow. Orange, blue house, purple house, and yellow. So we're going to go ahead and face these face together and go ahead and chain sew each of these four. Okay, my friends, so we are looking at the 5x6 motorhome and the 5x6 multi over the yellow house. And remember how I told you that I would tell you a little trick? Well, I'm going to tell you again a little bit later detailed. But here we have the 5 inches, and here we have the 5 inches, and here we have the 10 inches. We know when we sew these two pieces together, we're going to lose a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. So when I cut this piece, I know I need to cut this piece by 9.5 by 7 to fit. So if you don't want to go through that math, I'm going to tell you a little trick later on, but I just wanted to clarify, when I do a quick pattern, I use whole blocks on the pad as an inch, and then I go through later and I correct and I alter the pattern as I'm making it to be the 9.5 by 7, or when the family's watching TV, I jot down my math real quick. But here I was just playing fast, and I want to walk you through that later. So let's go ahead and sew these two blocks together. And I did want to mention again that I told you I was using up some of the bobbins from the long arm machine. So I keep rethreading my machine and using those neutral to pastel colors, because that's what fits on my quilt. And I'm using up the thread. When I run out of thread, I simply go back a 1/2 inch to an inch and re-sew over that, locking in my stitches. And that way I'm benefiting and saving, reusing, upcycling the thread that otherwise might be wasted, and using it on a beautiful new quilt. All right, so like this pattern, we've worked on it, and instead of cutting the pieces, I wanted to show you a different way. 5 plus 5 is 10. Sew them together. You lose a 1/4, lose a 1/4. So this needs to be 9.5 by 7. But if we don't want to do it that way, what a lot of us do is we simply come over to the cutting board with all of our pieces, either right before or right after we press them, right before we press them to open the seams, right before. And we put them on the cutting board. We have our ruler and we have our rotary blade, and I'm simply going to square up the blocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this stack, and one at a time I'm going to bring those around. I want to keep this side because that's very important to me, but I want to go ahead and trim this other side off so that all of my blocks go together at the next round very easily. So I'm taking my rotary cutter, opening it and closing it each time, making sure I'm perfectly lined up. And then I'm going to simply trim off that excess piece. And you saw my ruler moved because I'm juggling with my camera in between me and the cutting board. And then I'm going to continue to do that for each and every piece so that all of them line up perfectly. So that is one way to get around it. And that way, my friends, if your 1/4 inch seam is a little off, you're a little more, you're a little less, it's not going to hurt because you are simply trimming each block to match each time. And you can line up your lines to where you're perfectly square and simply pop off that top, throw that into the scrap pile, and I'm going to show you how to make some more scrappy twine for going in our junk journals with all the scraps. So don't throw those away. But we're simply going to trim off each and every one, lining up our lines, making everything perfect, and then just popping off that top. And again, this piece of scrap we're going to save for making some fun, frilly things for our junk journals. All right, so we have our stack that we've trimmed up nicely. We've come back over to the ironing board. And when do you need to trim? Well, you need to trim anytime you've put two pieces together with one piece, if you have not corrected your pattern to show that 1/2 inch. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this down, open it up, and iron it back. Press it back. And we're going to take that block, throw that one out of our way, and do the next. And we're just going to keep on pressing the entire stack. And pressing is not a burden if you have a place where you can set up that iron before you start sewing for the day. You've got your iron ready, you've got your cutting mat out and on a table, you've got a separate table for the sewing machine. And when you set up that those tables, if you don't have a permanent place in your house, it's nice to be able to do an entire quilt before we tear it down and have to clean it off for dinner. So if you're having to eat dinner in the living room in front of the TV set, I am going to show you an upcoming demonstration how to make a soup bowl cozy. Because, my friends, it is winter and we all like our warm dishes, either our casseroles or our soups or our stews can all go in a nice big bowl, and we can enjoy those with a soup bowl cozy in our lap as we watch TV, and that way we can keep our dining room table free for our sewing and crafting needs. What do you think? I personally love that idea. All right, and we are just going through this stack, and then we're going to go back and add these to some other blocks. And our next step is the blue with the motorhome and the red house connecting to the bicycle with what we're calling the orange block. So we're going to connect these two together. So we're going to put them together right sides, and we're going to pin at the seams, and we're going to put that in the sewing machine, and we're going to chain stitch all 4 of those blocks. Connecting our motorhomes with our yellow multi, and we're putting them together. One thing when you do your own pattern, you need to double check your numbers, because I said it was 13 inches when it needed to be 10. So, very funny. But you still do it just the same. Instead of cutting off my 1/2 inch, we're just going to cut off my 3 inches. Lift it, pull it over there, grab my next. I've got 2 more to do on these. I'm matching them up. One of this color. And again, hooking a pin in there reassures you you're right on target. ready to go back over to the ironing board. Get all my pretty pieces pressed out. And our blocks are coming together very nicely. Pressing those seams, making sure our blocks lay flat, bringing them to the cutting board, making sure they're perfectly aligned, and then adding the next set of fabric pieces that we've already pre-cut out to the proper size to the pattern that we have created. And again, we cut this one multicolor at 13 inches instead of 10. So that's why the long strip there. We're going to go over and trim it off real quick, square it up. But I am loving how all of these colored fabrics go so well together. I think we've done a nice choice of selecting them, but I've already started thinking and wondering what we're going to do for a border and what we're going to do for the binding. And I'm thinking the binding may be this color, but the borders I have not decided yet. I'm thinking maybe a solid, but I'd like to use one of them that I have already in the quilt. I'm not wanting to go with a blue because I think I have more of the greens and the yellows, so I don't want to use blue as a border. But that is one thing we've got to think about and start planning because we're getting close to that stage. Okay, and now we're working on our blue-green house and putting our yellow house together. So we're going to go ahead and put these right side up and face them together. So we're taking them, laying the blue-green over on the top, flipping it around so that I have these two pieces right side together. We're just going to pop those into the sewing machine. Again, I could do all four of them at one time if I put some needles, pins in the fabric. And I like to put the pins right where the seams are. And that's usually 2 pins, at least 2 pins for every 12 inches. And I do slow down right before the seams, make sure my seams are still going in under the needle correctly. And I hold it to the very end because we don't want the last ½ inch being torqued to where it would be off of my 1/4 inch seams. So we're putting these two together, right sides together, making sure we only have one of each block picked up. And then we're going to go ahead and put them under the needle. And I can lock stitch when I start just for my own confidence. If you don't lock stitch when you start and end, it is possible that if you hold them too tautly or they have too much pressure on them, they could pull a stitch or two at the end. I just like to take the precaution so that doesn't happen. All right, 2 more of these to go and we go on to the next color. one of these two blocks. So even though I call them blocks, because they are different pieces, we actually have 4 blocks in this whole quilt, because I'm not going to count the 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. We have 25 pieces in each block and 4 blocks for the quilt. So that's actually 100 cut pieces of fabric in this pattern, not including my borders or my binding. Okay, and then we're going to pick up our pattern and see if we can do one more before we run back over to the ironing board. So what I have is my, let's see what I have. I have this piece over here down to the purple. And now I can connect that to this piece that I just finished. So we're going to go down to the bottom, and we have the blue and the motorhome, the bicycle with the orange and the red house. We're going to connect it to the house, the grass, the multi, and the greenhouse. So we're going to put these two side by side, and then we're going to go back over to the iron and press these blocks. Trim them to make sure they're perfectly lined up on all sides. And then we're going to connect the next sitting. We put all these blocks into one block. And so we're going to make 4 blocks, and then we're going to put them together into the quilt. So I'm very excited about that. There's my first one. And we take one piece of each. We match them face to face, right sides together. And it does happen when you're ironing that this crease that's supposed to be all up will go down. So that's another thing. You can decide whether to immediately go back to the iron or whether we need to hold that piece as we sew it to make sure it goes upright, and then we'll pay a little bit extra attention back at the iron so all of our seams are laying flat and not twisted. Okay, 2 more to go, and then we go press. And green. So again, it's easy to create your own pattern on graph paper. You just have to account for your 1/4 inch seams, trim in between each of your sewing, and making your own pattern can be very, very exciting. And you feel so good about it. You feel completely rewarded, and knowing that you do have a one-of-a-kind quilt. So nobody out there in the world has one exactly like you, because you have created your own quilt, you've selected your own fabrics, you've auditioned them to see what fits right together, and you have made it yourself. Now, the most serious thing I need to think about is, what are my borders going to be and what is my binding going to be? And I know you've heard that. So we're going to audition those soon as I get inspired to make that decision. All right. All right, now we have all of our panels ironed and pressed. So now I can go ahead and connect these to their other parts. So I'm very, very excited about that. And so up here we have the bicycle and the motorhome part, this long strip, and we're going to connect it to, of course, the one on the bottom. So let's flip my stack upside down. Oh, one more seam. Flip my stack upside down and pull up the bottom 4. So we have this stack, which is our yellow motorhome multi with our multi-yellow house, blue-green house, 5x4, 5x4, and our blue. So we're going to connect these 2 pieces together. So let's go ahead and do that. So excited. And our blocks are really coming together. Let's turn back on our machine. We're going to attach these blocks. 100 pieces, not including borders, in our twin size quilt top. That's a lot. That's good. That's crazy. I've never counted, I don't think. And this one is a little larger, so what I would do is I'd probably be putting 4 or 5 pins in this if I were going to pen. But what we're going to do is go nice and slow, make sure our seams are in the correct direction, and that we maintain that 1/4-inch seam. And we're lined right up on the 2 fabrics. Another seam there, and that seam goes up. Didn't want to go up. This seam goes down. Beautiful. All right, let's do the next 3 identical to that. And then we can iron or press the seams and connect the whole bottom panel. And then we'll press it, and then we'll connect all 4 pieces together. All right. See how they're slightly off there? And we want to hold them together to where that edge is right correctly on the edge. Okay. And seams are all in the correct direction. Stop and verify before you sew over that part. And if we were sticking a pin in it, we would know beyond a shadow of a doubt because we actually pin that part down. Two down, 2 to go. Sometimes I grab a hold of the piece underneath here and give it a slight tug so it lays up flat and plumb with the other. Making sure our seams are laying correctly. we go back to the ironing board. But I do want you to see that. So let me show you what we have just connected together. And again, that is almost 1/4. We've got this big panel here on the table, but I wanted to press that seam so it goes correctly when we sew on the last piece. All right. And we chain stitch these, so I'm just disconnecting each from the other before we go to the iron. Okay, my friends, and if you have pressed between each of the blocks that we have added on, yours too can look perfectly pressed and ready for the next step on each of the blocks that you add. Yay! Okay, so now we have pressed our pieces and we are ready to go ahead and continue to connect the last two together, which would be the ones that we have just ironed. So we're down to 4 blocks here and 4 blocks here. And we're going to grab our little book to verify at each and every step. Turn that upside right. And we're going to connect these together. And then we are ready to put all 4 of the final blocks together to complete our twin size quilt minus the borders. So I'm very excited. And we're going to take our top one, face it over top, pick up our bottom block, match the 2 of these up. Oh my goodness, we match perfectly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew these 2 together. And again, we're dealing with a larger 2 pieces. So I would probably use a half a dozen to 10 pins if I were pinning this and setting it aside, or a beginner quilter, or if I just were comfortable with pins and wanted it perfectly precise. I would be using 6 to 10 pins on each of these blocks to connect them before I put them under the sewing machine. All right, so again, we're watching our seams. We're sewing at a 1/4 inch. And I am off about 1/8 of an inch at the very end here. Not too bad. All right, so let's do our second. And we're going to take the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom. We're going to hold those together. We're doing one at a time. If I were doing and laying them all out, I would want my sticky notes and my pens. Okay. And we're going to put more thread on. And again, at the beginning, remind you that I were using these bobbins from the long arm, and I'm using a lot of them with just very little thread on it because it's my goal to go ahead and use up the little bits of bobbin on it so we can fill it up and do the quilts and the quilting. So we're going to take a new bobbin, we're going to put it with the thread up, push it on, we're going to put our little cap on. We've got our thread, we put it just like the machine instructs, pull it down, pull it up, put it through, pull it down. There's 2 bars here to catch, and then we thread the needle. And then, like I mentioned earlier in this video, because I am using up thread that is multicolor and pastels from the long arm machine, I'm going to go about 1 inch back on my quilt. I'm going to hold that top thread as I start so I don't make a nest on the bottom. And we're just going to go ahead and continue to sew. So that slowed me down ever so lightly. Not bad at all when you think of reusing and upcycling the thread instead of taking those little bits off and wasting them. And you know, I like to use everything. So I'm going to show you in upcoming tutorials how I use little bits of thread like that, a little bit less, in my raw edge appliques. I also use it with some wash away stabilizer to make scarves, and better yet, we're going to make some upcoming bookmarks out of thread alone. The thread that would normally be thrown away, we're going to use some stabilizer that washes away. We're going to put enough thread in there, and then we're going to sew on it. We're going to cut it out the size of a bookmark, put a little tassel on it, all out of wasted thread. So I'm very excited about that upcoming tutorial as well. So many wonderful crafty projects you can use to upcycle and recycle and use. So there's no waste, or very little waste if we have to. And again, out of all the trimmings that I've trimmed these blocks, because I didn't sit down and do my 1/4 inches, I've cut some of these a 1/2 inch off at times. We're going to use that upcoming tutorial, because I love making those short tutorials, about how to make different frou-frou ribbons for the sides of my junk journals. They work as page markers. They work as that feel-good, huggly, cuddly, lovable junk journal part that I love. So it looks great and feels great. But again, the purpose of today, my friends, is you too can create your own pattern. Do not be stumped if you do not have a pattern in mind, or that you want to use up scrap material. You can get graph paper. You can make out your graphs to be about 1 inch per graph block, and create your own patterns. And then sit there, do your quick calculations. Remember, a 1/2 inch per block is going to go away with your seams. And that's a 1/4 inch on each side. All right, almost done with our last piece. So excited. We're going to go press these, and then I'm going to show you what they look like. Then we're going to put them together into the whole quilt top. All right, the big reveal so far. And again, the whole top is going to be 4 of these pieces put together. But let's take a look and see what we see. What do you think? I hope you're loving this as much as I am, my friends, because I am so excited. I think the colors on this are so neutral and yet so bright and perky and happy. So let's go ahead and press this seam line. Then we're going to go over to come back here in front of the table, and we're going to sew all 4 of these together. there's one of my two. Now let's go ahead and sew this one together. And I have my houses going up, my houses going up, and matching those together. Ready to go press these pieces then. We are so close to being done, my friends. I am loving this. All right, my friends, so now we are taking our two pieces. So I have this one complete and the other half complete of my twin, not including my borders, so don't get excited. I still have my borders to do. And we're gonna go ahead and put these across and match them up. Let's see what we're doing. We're upside down. So let's go ahead and take this. And we're gonna make sure we're right side up. We're gonna fold these two halves together and sew us. And then we're going to have our twin. And we'll come back in probably a second episode and do our binding. Okay. And I just want to realign these up and double check and triple check to make sure I am putting them together correctly. And we're not. Okay, so now when I put the edges together and I flip this one over, everything is going upright. So let's go ahead and hook these together. Now again, I would use a pin about every 4 to 6 inches, mainly using the seams as the place I'm going to put my pens. But right now I think we're gonna plug us in. I may have enough thread to go across, may need to change my spool again. And we're gonna connect these two halves. All right. I held my 2 threads as I started so I don't nest at the beginning. You only got to worry about that every time you start a new piece. Or a new thread. And because I did not use pens, I have to go very slow and make sure I'm perfectly lined up. Because there's a lot of weight on this that can torque and pull, so I want to roll it kind of in my lap and on the table and keep it going as I go. And that way I maintain all the bulk very well. get to see how it looks as a twin size quilt. What do we think? Now the big decision on my borders. What do you think the border should be? I'm going to go ahead and hold off on my border selection to give you about a week to tell me what you think the border should be. So should I have 1 border, 2 borders, 3 borders? Do you like your twin size quilts or any size quilts, oversized, regular size? What would you do as the borders? Help me out. These are absolutely beautiful colors. I have more of most of these fabrics, and let me know your thoughts of what you would do in the borders, for the borders, and for the binding of this quilt. I'd love to hear your answers. I'll see you real soon, my friends. I'm looking forward to those comments. So comment right now, what borders would you put on this quilt? More tutorials coming up very soon. Thanks so much.